Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our final session of the day here on Tuesday, 3 o'clock session, which is the research session. Our PDMI research partners, Joe and Rich from DRMetrix and Kantar, joining us, and we're really glad to have them here. We've put a big premium on research at the PDMI. We also have partnerships with Media Monitors and Nielsen. Nielsen could not be here, travel restrictions, and we had Media Monitors scheduled, but on Friday got word that Frank Camerata from Media Monitors had to hang back and not join us for the week. So still going to be a great panel. We're looking forward to it. Again, want to thank our sponsor at Mojo, who has handled the sponsorship for the educational sessions. A quick message from Greg Silvano.
Before the session begins, I'd just like to say that Mojo is a very proud sponsor of the education series. We hope you go to every session, ask lots of questions, and learn new things. Enjoy your day. We'll see you soon.
And again, thank you to Greg and Mojo for their support. With that, we're going to kick off the research roundtable, and to do so, I welcome Kevin Gaffney from CoreMedia Systems.
Thank you, guys. And again, thanks for the group at PDMI for putting this together. We were joking, it's so nice to see pants on people again instead of just the shirts with videos that we're used to seeing. And we have some good content here. Again, we lost Frank at Media Monitors, but both of these gentlemen up here have lots of great information on kind of the state of the state in the industry. Yapping a little bit longer than usual has never been an issue with these guys, so that we certainly will fill up the time. Collectively, we represent quite a bit of essentially the plumbing of the performance space. CoreMedia is a software provider, and DRMetrix and Kantar are both data providers in the space and essentially watch everything that's going on out there. So they'll give us a great presentation on essentially what they're seeing ground level as far as what's happening out in the performance marketing space. And with that, I will turn it over. We're going to start with Joseph Gray. Joseph is the president and CEO at DRMetrix. And once Joe is done, we're going to turn it over to Richard Radzik. Richard is the vice president of Kantar BVS that does both monitoring and for verification as well as competitive data. So we'll start off with Joseph.
Good afternoon, everyone. Everyone can hear me all right? Perfect. So I spot something a little different here on this slide. I don't know if anyone can see it, but kind of an interesting dynamic with DRMetrix, now an iSpot company. I think the future of what we're going to be able to report in panels like this is pretty exciting. So my presentation today is going to kind of go backwards and then go forward. Backwards in the sense that the COVID 2020 environment was a very interesting case study between how brand advertisers reacted to the climate and how direct response advertisers reacted to the same environment. It's really a tale of two cities. In the presentation today, we're going to talk about different sectors of the industry. I'm going to put them all up on the screen here so everyone can see them. On the upper left, we have brand types of campaign executions where there's really no consumer engagement, and audience metrics are coming from companies like Nielsen. Then you have brand direct, which is kind of somewhere in between the two extremes, where you have campaigns that are using a vanity call to action, like an 800 number or a website. Now, these campaigns, because they can't measure exactly back to the individual network, daypart, or creative where the leads are coming from, again, they're using the same vanity 800 or domain across all of the media, are treated differently by our company than the bottom category, or what we call traditional or direct response advertisers. And the difference here is that we have a group of advertisers that have different doorways for consumers to respond through, so they can segment exactly what network, daypart, and even to the creative level generated specific consumer responses. So we're going to talk about how all of this played out, these different categories, in a very interesting year, to say the least, where you had a lot of media disruption. I think it sets the stage for a broader understanding of the advantages of direct response, the uniqueness of direct response, in contrast to other models like D2C or brand. So our study focusing backwards is on the D2C brand direct and direct response segments. I'll leave the brand segment to my friend Rich at Kantar. I'm sure he'll cover that pretty well. And we're going to start with looking at the top 50 web mobile D2C advertisers for 2019, sort of like pre-COVID, and also the 50 traditional advertisers in direct response. We're going to transition between those two back and forth and look at the results. We're looking across 130 national networks for this study, focusing mainly on national cable and national digital broadcast networks. So we're going to look at before, during, and after the quarantine lockdown, and how these different types of advertisers reacted to this very disrupted media environment. So just a quick overview before I show you the data, how it was created. We obviously use ACR, automated content recognition technology. We have computers monitoring networks 24/7, looking for new ads and fingerprinting and detecting them after they're taken through a registration process. So every time an ad runs on any of these 130 national networks, we're pulling that into the database. We do monitor commercial-grade feeds of the networks, and that allows us to see both the national ad break as well as what we call the DPI ad break. Many in the industry might refer to it as a national local break. The valuation differences between those two break types are significant, and the level of reach in terms of audience is very different as well. And then we do segment creatives that use DR variations. Again, more traditional direct response, different phone numbers, maybe promotion codes that change by network, different mobile text messaging variants to qualify for that segmentation. And so here are the media weeks that we have utilized to define pre-quarantine, quarantine, and post-quarantine periods. All right, so let's get to the good stuff. This is an example of the top 50 web mobile D2C branded advertisers that we studied based on their 2019 projected expenditures. So you see a lot of really well-known companies there on the list, but this was half the study. Wanted to see how these advertisers spent pre-quarantine, the year before 2019, and then into pre, post, and during quarantine itself. And then traditional direct response advertisers, this is the composition of that audience based on top 2019 spending advertisers. So that sets the stage. And what happened to these two groups during the COVID period? Now, just looking at it across all three pre, during, and post-quarantine periods, focusing in on the brand direct advertisers, you see some of them are up pretty considerably. But of course, the problem that these more branded advertisers have is really understanding consumer response and behavior. They're a little bit better positioned than a straight brand advertiser who has to rely solely on traditional metrics. So they're not able to understand, are consumers still responding? Are consumers still buying? But again, I think the direct-to-consumer subset, they have some sense of at least are consumers responding. And so some of them saw some opportunities, and you can see here Noom took advantage of it. But look at the difference between the more branded D2C advertisers and the traditional direct response advertisers over those pre-quarantine and post-quarantine periods. Church & Dwight up 526%. There's a difference that's starting to happen. You can see it in the data. The direct-to-consumer traditional, or what we call direct response advertisers, are seeing that consumers are not only responding, and we all knew that HUT levels, households using television, were increasing during the quarantine period. People were stuck at home, so they're watching a lot more TV. But interesting to see, based on that unique measurement, and knowing that consumers were also still buying still transacting. Now that would elude a brand advertiser in a very disrupted environment like COVID, but something that the direct response advertisers can see very, very clearly. If you almost think of COVID as a storm, you've got direct response advertisers with 20/20 vision. They see exactly what's happening. Not so much on the branded side. And so we all know what happened. A lot of the branded advertisers kind of took shelter in the storm, while the direct response advertisers realized very quickly rates are going down, more people are watching television than ever before, and these respondents are buying, converting. And that understanding really is only possible for direct response advertisers based on how we execute campaigns as direct response advertisers. So with that actionable information, what did our industry do? We jumped in and bought media like it was going out of style, and we saw conversions that we haven't seen for years. The climate was ripe, and it was something very interesting that direct response advertisers were able to react to in real time, while the brand side of the industry was maybe kind of lost. They didn't know what to do. And traditional metrics weren't helping clarify. So what do? You take a break. You sit to the sidelines. And obviously, the direct response advertisers were able to take full advantage of that situation. And that's really the major takeaway here. As it relates to direct response as an industry, the fact that we can take advantage of a disrupted media environment and show it in a case study like this, it kind of really resonates why direct response is so unique and why branded advertisers and even hybrid advertisers need to take a closer look at direct response. Perfect example. That's what this study is really all about. So we understand that advertisers using traditional television models were at a disadvantage. The data shows that. And as I said before, ratings can only tell you one thing, but it can't tell you whether consumers are responding, and it can't tell you whether consumers are still purchasing or engaging in the product or service. And so this is the tale of two cities. This is what I'm really excited to share with you guys today. Let's look at one sector of direct response, which is a fascinating sector. As seen on TV, advertisers that sell products have always been on the more remnant side of direct response. So if networks have remnant inventory, they're going to turn to these tried and true, trusted advertisers to help them in a disrupted environment to monetize any sort of distressed inventory. In 2019, before COVID, the as seen on TV product segment was down about 26% year over year. That's the biggest setback in terms of year-to-year negative growth that we've seen since we've been monitoring, which began in 2015. To see that turn around, and I think it was up like 55% in aggregate over the entire COVID year, 2020, from negative 26 to positive 55%. We've never seen that kind of swing before. It just shows you how that side of the industry was able to really leverage direct response to take advantage of the market opportunity. Take somebody like Idea Village, whose media expenditures were up over 1,000% during the quarantine period itself. And I think that's when media rates really took a hit. And that's when their opportunity existed. And of course, they're testing different things, maybe even stuff that they had put to the side that hadn't tested well in the prior year, but they threw it back on the air. And they were able to get rid of all this excess inventory out of their warehouses. And again, it was something that we haven't seen in years, but it really took something dynamic like COVID to make this kind of a market opportunity available to everyone in the DR space. So you can see here some of the big winners that really took advantage of the COVID situation in terms of low media rates and high viewership. And there is a study, by the way, all this data that you can pick up at our DRMetrix booth that has all this information and a lot more in it. But at a high level, we had about just shy of 5,000 direct-to-consumer brands that were using some form of consumer response in their advertising In 2019, 37% were using direct response variations, so they're traditional direct response in execution. These advertisers, if they were using a similar methodology of direct response, wouldn't have had to take a back seat during COVID. They would have seen the same market opportunity that those of us that were measuring and seeing consumer engagement and response, and they would have obviously had a much better year than they did sitting on the sidelines. So that's the story going backwards. Just to summarize it and what you'll see in the study, you have your web mobile branded advertisers, and we can see their pre-quarantine, quarantine, and post-quarantine data in the study. If you look at the very bottom here, you'll see that there was a change pre-quarantine. They were down about negative 5% for the period over the prior year. And in the quarantine itself, that's when they all started to pull off the air. The whole category, the top 50 category from the year prior, was down 34% on their expenditures. Now, let's look at the traditional or the direct response advertisers over this same period. I'll go to page 2 here. Pre-quarantine, they're up 37% over the prior year. They're already starting to see the sea change and beginning to take advantage of it. By the time we're into the quarantine lockdown, they're already up 76.6%. The top 50 from the prior year, up 76.5% over the prior year. So this is the kind of summary data. If you look at the post-quarantine period, you had an acceleration of traditional brand pulling off, down 47.4%. You still had about a 26% growth over the prior year from the traditional direct response segment. So again, tale of two cities, two very different behaviors to the same event. And the difference was measurability, was attribution, something that direct response television advertisers excel at. So anyway, these are some of the things that you'll find in the study. You're welcome to come by and grab a copy of that. Let's talk about what's been happening in the first half of 2019 versus 2020 versus the current year, 2021. I'm sure everyone in this room is aware that the DR business is cyclical. Really great year in 2020 means what in 2021? I probably don't need to show you the data. You realize what it means. Brand's going to come back in and use up a lot of the inventory, which are scatter market, national cable, day-part inventory, and it's going to be a lean year for direct response. But let's look at the actual data. So let's start with 2019. You can see on the screen the DR billings segmented from the brand DR billings. So this was the year, by the way, where we saw, I believe, a 26% decline just from the product segment of DR. And this is all of DR, which includes lead generation, two-step, multi-step, et cetera. In 2020, again, across the entire category, you're going from 1.3 up to 1.5, 1.6. You can see the number of airings, and then you can see the brand DR segment, which is really the segment that disrupts the direct response industry the most. That's not a huge amount of growth for brand direct. These guys have been growing about 24, 25% a year as far as we've been measuring back to 2015. It's like unrelenting growth. And what they basically did in 2020 was closer to a flat line. You just didn't see the growth. Still impressive, they were able to keep their expenditures and ad units a little bit north of the prior year. But in context, understand that these guys normally grow about 24, 25% a year. So that's a big step back for that category. And then let's look at this year, first 6 months of the year, first 2 media quarters. Punishing for the DR industry. We're down to about 1.1. We're below 2019 levels. That's the cyclical nature of the space. Had a really great year in 2020, tougher year in 2021. I'm sure that's not news to anyone in the room here. Brand direct obviously had a big bump up from the prior year, and this is where that disruption's coming from. A lot of the web mobile-based companies are really coming back into the marketplace with a lot of force. So that is what that looks like. Now, I did break out some stuff just for fun for product DRTV campaigns. So as we know, in 2019, they had that, again, 26% step back. Long form, you can see what the numbers look like in terms of units and spend. 2020, big change in the quality of media that the short form product advertisers were buying. All of a sudden, day parts that maybe would have never paid out because the rates were so low. So even though units are not substantially higher percentage-wise, the spend levels are up higher because it's a higher quality of inventory, more consumer response that's paying out. Long form, what you've seen is a depreciation of the asset itself. The average cost of an infomercial slot on network television has been going down. And I think everyone that uses the format, 20.5 minute, knows that it's been going down. The units, not so much. They've been holding pretty consistent. 2021, again, units are tapering down a little bit. The value of the infomercial inventory per unit average is down quite a bit. And we know there are a lot of things that are causing that. But that is a look going backwards in the current year. There you are, sir. Thanks, everyone.
Good afternoon, everybody. Everyone's been telling me it's just like riding a bike. Just like a bunch of the speakers here today and you guys, I haven't spoken to anyone face-to-face, just one-on-one, no matter just talking to all you guys here. So I have a confession, and it's hard for me to do because, you know, I consider myself a tough guy from New Jersey. I'm actually a little nervous. I got a little butterflies in my stomach. Now, the butterflies aren't going to be as worse as when I watched my Yankees play the Red Sox at 5 o'clock today. But let me hop onto my Kantar bike and hopefully educate you guys on some multimedia ad trends. First of all, Joe, great job on focusing on the DR categories and some of the trends there. What I'm going to do with Kantar is give a more holistic perspective using the wealth of all of Kantar's media that it covers, and it keeps growing year after year. So it's going to include digital video, the new streaming services that we just started last year, including Hulu, Peacock, Roku, Tubi, Paramount, obviously all the traditional linear TV, digital display, paid social, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, paid search, radio, out-of-home, magazines, and newspapers. So a lot of the data is going to get rolled up into hopefully some simple charts for you guys. Let's look at just a 5-year trend. In 2016, we saw the total advertising is $159 billion. 2017 dropped a little bit to 151. 2018, through the election, it bumped up to almost close to 172 billion, 171 in 2019. And then obviously in 2020, it dropped to 154 billion, a 10% drop. That 10% number, and just like talking to people, and just not even in our industry, because as Joe alluded to, a lot of people excelled in our industry, especially our performance-based clients. But when you talk to people outside our industry and you ask them, hey, how's your job going? How's work? How's sales? The number that came across to me most of the time was, yeah, we're down about 10% compared to the previous year. So it just kind of gives you a snapshot how the trends in advertising roll over just into the real world. If we look at 2021, obviously the numbers rebounded, similar to 2018 numbers, 12% increase versus last year. Video is increasingly dominating the media mix. And you know, you heard content is king. Well, video is king. 2019, video was only 48% of the pie. In 2020, it went over 52%. In 2021, it's 54% of the pie. We're expecting that trend to continue in 2022. If you look at all video formats are experiencing growth, if you look at first half 2019, first half 2020, versus first half 2021, national TV is up 9%, but still not up near what it was in 2019. Local TV up 6%, pretty close to what it was in 2019. And obviously online video has been growing, so up 11%. AVOD, it's obviously a growing medium. That's why Kantar added it last June. We're forecasting the media mix of AVOD to be 12% this year. Again, since we just started it in June, if you look at some of the industry benchmarks, it was about 7 to 9% last year. The year before that, about 4 to 5%. So you can expect that trend to continue for AVOD. As you see, online video has 15% of the pie, local TV 17%, and then national TV. Growth, unfortunately, seemed to be exclusive to digital and TV. So if you look at on the digital side, the numbers are a little misleading because we added desktop PLA and mobile text PLA to it. I'm going to break that out later so you can see which groups actually increase. But if you look at television, up 10%. Unfortunately, our friends in the magazine newspaper area continued to decline, rebounded a little bit from last year, but down from 2019 numbers. Outdoor, almost all the way back. And remember, outdoor before the pandemic hit was a growing medium with all the digital properties out there. We expect that to be returned to growth next year. And radio, again, a medium that's on the decline. Let's kind of break it out on digital channels and see how they rebounded. If you look at network television, 9% year over year. Again, the digital number is a little off, but if you look over to the right, it'll give you the breakout on how internet displays up 25%, online videos up 68%. That internet search number is what kind of misconstrued the numbers a little bit, but mobile web and paid social are up 36 and 28%. There's recovery across a whole array of categories. Retail was on the top of the list. Again, we're comparing first half 2020 versus first half 2021. 134% increase on the retail side. The financial services rebounded. Telecom a little bit, but they still have a little bit to make up because they were down 55%. Automotive up 41%. Beverages on the alcohol side, 62%. Beverages, non-alcoholic, down 20%. And I just got this great stat before I came up on the stage. Alcohol consumption at this conference was up 100% compared to last year.
You can do better, though. We still have a couple of days left.
We're expecting that forecast to grow next year in Miami. All right, I'm going to talk politics. I'm going to share my political views with you. Is that okay, Kevin? Is that something I should stay away from?
Just not the Yankees.
Yeah. I'm going to share some slides that our CMAG group really does a great job on focusing on the political category. And some of the numbers I'll show you. 2022, while it's not an election year, there's going to be a huge impact on media availability and media rates, and I'll show you that in a little bit. If you look at the 2018 numbers, that total number is about $5.1 million in a non-presidential election year. If you looked at the 2020 election, it was about $7.9 billion. Look at 2022, a non-presidential election year, we're going to have similar spending, $7.8 billion. Almost to the T to 2020 presidential. So you're going to see $3.8 billion in broadcast, $1.4 in cable TV, $1.2 in digital, OTT, $1.2 billion, and then radio, $215 million. Now these next two charts really tell you, you don't realize how many, you're kind of in your own state, you have your own races, you don't realize how many races are up for grabs in 2022. And again, I don't know if there are any buyers in this room. 2022 is going to be a challenge for you guys, especially in certain regions and markets in the country. There are 469 U.S. Congress seats up in 2022, 34 U.S. Senate seats. There are 38 governor races. There's actually 2 this year. There's actually 1 in our home state in New Jersey. So there's 36 and 22. We just had the California recall. And you guys that lived out here, you saw all that advertising the last week or 2 of that. Just look at the House, 435 House races. A lot of redistricting going on, New York, California, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, West Virginia, Illinois are losing seats. Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Montana, Oregon, Colorado are all gaining seats. So all that's going to trickle down to more political advertising. And everyone knows what's going on in our political environment. The Senate's 50-50. The House is just a near margin by Democrats in the governor's race. So major impact in a lot of different markets and increased advertising on the political side. I'm just going to show, there's a whole slew of slides that actually my partner Steve Passwaiter just did at the TVB. If you want more information on, just reach out to me. It really, it's going to pertain especially to our marketplace, our direct response marketplace. So the Senate race, just one more last slide on this. 34 contests are open: Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, Alabama. Again, the current balance is 50-50. We're forecasting the most active spending to be in Arizona, Ohio, and New Hampshire. All right, so I've done this a couple of times for the PDMI, and this is the last time I'm doing COVID-themed stuff. I'm sick of COVID. I'm not sick with COVID, sick of COVID, so you guys have to back up. But this chart, just kind of, if you look at this chart, it replicates actually the trends of COVID cases that happened in the last year. But look at the numbers that folks spent. Approximately $6.2 billion was spent on COVID-themed ads in 2020. Cable TV had the most COVID-themed ads at $3.6 billion, and network TV $2.4 billion. Obviously, it peaked in May of 2020 when the cases were at the high, went down during the summer months. As it peaked up, as kids went back to school, and we get to the winter months, it went up to about $712 million a month. Then as the case, again, it looks just like you go on the CDC website and the cases chart, it'll match similar to that. You saw it trying to go down, but obviously with the Delta virus, it's kind of flattened out the rest of the year. So pretty soon it'll be at 0. And it's the last time I'm gonna, oh, I lied, I got one more. Just on the top 20 brands, some of these are no surprise. AbbVie has been on the top of this list from the start. Domino's a big COVID theme advertisers. Some of them dropped off a little bit. Home Depot went down a little bit. Amazon was a little higher on the list. And honestly, I don't know why. I just noticed this when I was looking at St. Jude Hospital. I don't remember COVID-themed commercials, but it's interesting. I'm actually going to look a little deeper on that, but I thought that was interesting. That's it. Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. And again, any questions, need more information, that's my contact info. See me after this.
Thanks, Rich. I think from a questions perspective, I've got a couple to start you off, and we can certainly open it up to the room. So I know, Joseph, you showed a lot of the categories that are really interesting that many years ago they weren't direct marketers. So even I think of automotive, where you say, Chevrolet and Ford, they're absolutely not direct marketers, but you've got the Carvanas and the Shifts and, all these guys. So there's lots of these groups now that are almost coming to us a bit more than we've ever seen, where in the traditional world, measurement has always been, did I hit a cost per point, or what was my CPM or reach and frequency goal? But many of these guys now are measuring it based on reactions as well as audience, and I think it's just interesting. Are there other categories like that you've seen that haven't been traditionally DR focused, but now are jumping into that direction?
Well, I think we've seen over the past decade a huge influx. I mean, I remember back, because I think I've been doing this since like 1989, you know, when the industry was really product-based. I think my first client when I had my agency was Heartland Music. We were selling music memories, and that was a formula that worked well for years. After the dot-com bust, there was the birth of a direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical. And that was really the first group of brand advertisers that were spilling over into this hybrid category. And the networks, you know, began to treat them like direct response. You can buy networks, day parts, but obviously pricing the direct response inventory at a premium. And then you go from there. And I mean, today it's like every category under the sun. I was blown away seeing a commercial on the air this last week for a coffee, 3 coffees. Maxwell House was the primary brand, but there were 2 others in this ad, and they were kind of poking fun at the DR industry. It was a 3-minute ad. It was a parody, like, are we really going to do this? Yes, we are. In 1995, you can buy these 3 coffees. And, you know, that was just wild. I mean, so you're getting companies that have never been in the direct response industry before that are coming into this space. They love the fact that they can engage with consumers online, and they have that interactivity in their messaging and response. And they're starting to figure out that, hey, I could do something like that in television. I still have to figure out how I'm going to handle my attribution. That's a big challenge. But, you know, when you start seeing coffee companies putting up a $19.95 offer, call now for 3 different blends of coffee, I mean, that's kind of where things are going. It's changing. Everyone's jumping into what we would say is traditional DR. And you've got like this premium side of the DR marketplace with all these web, mobile, D2C campaigns. And you have the traditional side that's more on the remnant side of the marketplace with some of the traditional companies. But man, the space has just really grown over the years. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. Let me piggyback on that, Kev. The BVS business was founded in 1989 on direct response advertising. In 1989, people were getting faxes. There's no young people in here, so everyone knows
What's
what
a fax machine?
A fax machine, and then would manually put the data in a log. So we've been primarily, the majority of direct response folks have been using this, but over the last 2 or 3 years, and especially during COVID, talking about good things that happened during a traumatic time, is we're just dealing with so many more general advertisers that want do that same real-time optimization, attribution type thing. So there are major holding groups that are that never did DR, that farmed it out or are setting up their own in-house DR folks. There's advertisers that are developed their own in-house capabilities. So we're dealing with, which is great, and I'm sure, Kevin, you've seen it going into your system, probably you, Joe, too, looking for the competitive stand. Just so many more people are doing, and you could call it whatever you want, performance-based, hybrid, attribution, optimization, just there's just so many more people doing it now.
Yeah, and I think it's even just the way performance media is bought and analyzed that in the traditional world, I run a spot today, I don't necessarily know where it's run until next month, until I get the invoice in from the station. It's crazy to think that I'm waiting 30, 40 days to figure out where my spot actually ran. And you know, groups like both of you guys that could tell you same day, almost real time. And I think that's what's driving some of this as well, is that in the digital world, it's almost real time to be able to pull a lever and make some changes to, you know, what's happening. In the TV world, unless you're tracking it like a DR, like a performance buy, you're guaranteed for 2 weeks. I can't get off the air, and I don't know where my spot's going to run till 2 weeks or a month from now. So using both of your tools obviously just helps more and more brands to react and almost act like performance marketers, even if it's not that hardcore drive, like, hey, I want to measure 2 minutes around what happened here or whatever. They're still doing overnight posting and bringing in verification data and looking at competitive data and reacting to whatever's happening in real time. So it's certainly some interesting things that we're seeing happening, and the world is coming to us from a direct response performance marketing space. So we're excited about that as well. Right. Questions? The booze isn't for another hour and a half or so, so you might as well, yeah, here we go.
Thanks, guys. You were talking about the convergence of industry moving towards direct response. I would have to believe that some of the new e-commerce companies are taking advantage of the lessons taught by previous direct response brands, where they're kind of blending both brand presence and performance marketing in their spots and in their ads, because they know that the call to action could be an 800 number, it could be a website, it could be any of those things that the consumer responds to. So how are you kind of seeing some of these new up-and-coming e-commerce companies balance that between brand and performance?
I can start off with a little bit from our side. Again, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can certainly reach an audience. You can go and say, hey, I've got a reach and frequency goal of X, as well as then say what noise is being thrown off at a website or what noise is happening in social. So especially the new to the space type of clients where they don't have a lot of noise already, being able to track conversions and do some of that stuff when they're running quite a bit of either television or different media. It's just native to the world now to think that, hey, something happened here, I want to figure out if it's working or not, or should I get more of it? Like, it doesn't mean that you can't also say how many total rating points did I achieve or what was my overall reach and frequency. It just doesn't have to be exclusive that way.
Yeah, I'd say that today to be successful in this industry, you have to recognize that response and generating response and cost-effective response is not the whole ballgame. These advertisers are also very, very interested in the branding power of direct response, the branding power of television. And, you know, I think it's important that we understand what we're putting out in the marketplace in terms of creative. Obviously, we can measure whether it's effective, but is it building the right kind of brand messaging that we're looking for? And if you're an agency and you're not looking at the impacts of a direct response creative in terms of the branding and how consumers are interpreting and feeling about this ad that you're putting forth, you're missing the big picture. And so one of the things I'm excited about with this iSpot situation is they have a panel service where they can turn around in like 24 hours, like a 500-person focus study. And as the panelists are watching essentially an ad break, and they're asked questions after reviewing the commercials in sequence, but they also, while they're watching these commercials, they can, you know, hands up, hands down at different parts of the playback, and then they can answer various questions to kind of inform the marketer or the agency, you know, how did they perceive this message? You know, did it score well in messaging from a political perspective? How did the consumers view the company overall? You know, positive, negative, you can score it from 1 to 10. And you know, these panel measurements have been around for years on the brand side of the industry. They're usually very laborious and take a long time. But today, with all this automation and using online, you could do a panel of like 500 consumers like overnight and really understand, hey, that message might generate response, but it's being perceived negatively. And in this very polarized environment that we're in, whether it's COVID or whether it's political, as a CMO, if you get that message wrong, that's deadly. So, you know, a lot of the Fortune 100 companies, they're using these types of services to really understand what they're putting forth. And the objectives are about effective branding, right messaging, want to make sure consumers are interpreting the message in the right way, as well as direct response. And the advertisers want their cake and eat it too. They want to see all of that synergized together. And I think all these new tools are available today. You know, we just have to learn how to use them and win more business. Because as these .com advertisers are coming into the industry, you know, direct response agencies, our whole industry stands in a really advantageous place. You know, we're more compatible with the way these companies have done their business online. If we can take it to another level, if we can start really getting savvy about the branding aspects of what we're doing, then I think this industry can grow and thrive, and we'll get more and more of that business. You know, it's ours to lose, essentially.
Yeah, what I'm seeing, to answer your question, when these new general brand advertisers come to me and say, hey, I want to do some type of performance base, and what they actually call, when the general advertisers come to me, a hybrid, they're dipping their toes in the water. They're not changing their entire brands to direct response commercials, phone numbers, and URLs. They're dipping their toes. They're doing a targeted campaign in a particular region, a particular set of cable networks, and you know, getting their feet wet. What I'm seeing is I've actually turned into a consultant, which is, it's kind of crazy. I should start charging consultant fees. Like, and I think Kevin and Joe could allude to this. They just don't understand the space. Especially, and I think Kevin and I were talking about this the other day, people that were just doing digital, trying to come over to the TV side, they have no clue how TV works. So to answer your question, they're dipping their toes in water, getting their feet wet, massaging, seeing what's working, but eventually more and more percent of their campaign will come to some type of performance-based plan.
And just to circle back around quickly with that, I'm of the belief that the linear TV world needs a big kick in the ass to kind of stay current. So even little things like you get that invoice in at the end of the month and they say, hey, a spot ran whatever at 5:14 p.m. These guys are telling you second by second where it ran. So summing to the minute doesn't work anymore when you're doing attribution and looking at very granular data. You still get an invoice saying the spot ran at 5:14, where these guys can say, you know, 5:14 in 15 seconds is where it started, and it ended at 5:14 in 45 seconds. And so let's really start digging into response data based on that. So there's just so much of that just needs to be more contemporary with, you know, again, many of the hybrid guys get into the space not because they're so super interested in attribution and optimization, it's just immediacy. I can look at, you know, my clients today are looking at what happened yesterday and they're changing Thursdays and Fridays media because of that. You simply can't do that in the traditional world. You're locked in. So just the more immediacy, being able to react to that data is what I think they're starting to get into. I think we got another gentleman in the back.
Hi, Joseph. Interesting numbers that I saw up here, Richard. You showed a media expenditure comparing COVID-related advertising, where there was almost 10 billion in traditional cable TV advertising. I think that was the number, 1.4 billion, excuse me. And an equal number was something that you mentioned, CTV and OTT. So I'm wondering how Kantar is seeing the transition to spot checks using the transition from traditional DR channels to more streaming television. I'm wondering if you have any insights or any thoughts on that.
Yeah, actually, Kantar is going under a major initiative. Obviously, as media is moving to the OTT, addressable, and other areas, we're exploring and soon will announce ways that we can expand media to do OTT and other stuff, working with other third-party providers. Because we need to, like, when you saw the AVOD numbers, it's a nice piece of the pie that was missing from our multimedia database. It's up to 12% of the media. So we realize there's holes, but it's so much harder to get to these new medias. You know, tracking a newspaper or a radio station, a television station's well, it's not pretty easy, but we had the infrastructure for 30 plus years. So you're gonna hear some pretty cool things from Kantar on some areas that we're expanding, but a good point. There's definitely holes so you can get the complete picture.
Yeah, Frank, I gotta be honest. Measuring ACR on the glass at the smart TV level is, I think, important today. I've had a lot of our clients ask about streaming video, OTT, segmentation. How are you going to be able to, you know, measure these emerging formats? And, you know, it's the very reason that, you know, we have this iSpot company thing under our logo today. It's all about the smart TV data, the ability to measure at the consumer level. If you can segment what's running nationally from what's running locally, if you can understand what the consumer was watching, was it, a YouTube TV or a Hulu, or was it, a cable feed? This is in the data set today. So one of the things that I'm really excited about is bringing verified impressions into, our product suite, and to bring streaming media and OTT into our product suite. Even when you look at certain ad break types that all of us buy as direct response advertisers, I'm referring to the DPI ad breaks, or again, what many people call national locals. Those spot breaks have never been measured by Nielsen. We don't really know what the level of cover-up is when we buy one of those spots from Fox or CNN or whatever network we happen to be engaged in. We know we're paying a discount. We know there's response. But again, when you're looking at branding, which everyone should be looking at branding as well as direct response, we need to be able to articulate what's the audience for that. Where was the cover-up? So if you've got a Vizio a smart TV in a particular cable zone, if you've got like 18 million set-top or smart TVs out there, you only need one positive hit with the ACR per cable zone to know that it cleared. And extrapolate into cover-up, verified impressions. So that's kind of where I think the future of the space goes. It's going obviously to the consumer level, so you got to be right there on the glass. And of course, that's where advertising is slowly evolving to. We're not just putting out a message in mass anymore. We're picking the specific consumers that we're messaging or delivering to. And there's no way to get to the consumer level today that I'm aware of outside of being on the glass and working with these emerging smart TV panels that are coming into the marketplace. But that's what's so exciting about the future, the ability to aggregate that data into the current approaches that we're using.
Looks like we got another one in the back right corner there.
Great, thanks. You brought up a really interesting point with the smart TVs and hitting the glass, right? From my perspective, and I'm curious about your thoughts and where the industry's going, right? Right now, the privacy target is on Google and Facebook and the big players, but I don't think it's that long, and I'd like your thoughts, until all of a sudden the privacy folks realize, especially with the class action suit that was settled with Vizio, that those television manufacturers are watching you, not watching me personally, but watching that glass, and in some ways is even a bigger threat to privacy for consumers than just whether or not I did a Google search.
Well, privacy is a huge issue. I mean, look at the stuff that's going on with Apple and their privacy stance. What's kind of interesting about the smart TV as an evolved or evolving space, you have Vizio, certainly one of the first smart TV manufacturers to get out there and syndicate their data. And they were brought to task early on, and they had to go through a process of making sure the opt-in and everything was communicated to the government's satisfaction. There was a learning curve there, but they were one of the first to go through that learning curve, to get on the other side of that learning curve, and to have a viable panel data that they can make available so we can do all these amazing new things. So as other smart TV manufacturers jump into the marketplace, I think they'd be smart to look at what Vizio did and learn from their mistakes, what they did right, what they did wrong. But that marketplace is maturing pretty fast, and certainly it has been scrutinized pretty significantly in the past. You mentioned Vizio specifically because they kind of set the initial example for that. But I think we're in a place where they found that balance. Consumers do want suggestions on programming, kind of understanding their choices. Whether we're using Amazon Music and we're training that artificial intelligence server what kind of music we like, consumers are willing to trade off privacy for that. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm okay with Amazon knowing the kind of music I listen to because it allows them to program and deliver to me the music I enjoy, and it gets better the more I train. Same thing with the smart TVs. The more you train, the better the program suggestions are, and that's really the balance there. You have to give something of value to the consumer so they're willing to part with, you know, the privacy components. But again, we're not talking about exposing consumer data here. We're looking at things in a PII compliant manner. So that's an important distinction.
Kind of along those same lines, you know, I've got kids from 14 to 21, and, you know, they laugh at me, and, you know, I still watch cable TV, you know, and we've got probably 8, 9 TVs in our homes, you know, actually, someone has 3 in their bedroom, but, you know, 5 years from now and 10 years from now, if we're sitting here, what percentage do you think of these younger adults are actually going to be watching cable versus streaming, and how is that going to affect the advertising?
Well, I'm pretty young at heart, and I love to stream. So it's probably going to be a pretty big swing that direction.
Oh, yeah. So in 5 to 10 years, what % of kids will actually be watching traditional TV on a normal screen? I know there's real numbers out there, so I don't really want to quote on it, but obviously it's going to trickle down to near nothing.
Yeah, it's been interesting with COVID that the big screen all of a sudden has been a thing again, and perhaps that's, you know, sticky a bit. But, you know, to your point, even I was at a conference once and heard a good line that I'm now going to pirate and call it my own. But, you know, in the Nielsen world, there was demos of like 18 to 49, and you've got someone paying for college and someone going to college targeted in the same way. And clearly that can't be the way anymore. You know, it's just simply a waste of media funding to say, I'm going to put the same message to the two of them. So let's follow them and put the right message in front of the right person at the right time. And I certainly think whether it's more of the connected TV and targeting devices, whether you're watching on a phone or a tablet or the big screen, it should almost not matter at some point if you're just trying to reach that eyeball.
I think that's it as far as time. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Well done.
Thanks, everyone.